Hey guys, Mike here. So today I'm here to talk to you about 1997's Lost Highway, starring Bill Pullman as Fred Madison. In Lost Highway, after a strange encounter at a party, a jazz saxophonist is sent to prison for the murder of his wife. While in prison, he inexplicably morphs into a completely different person, is set free from prison, and begins to live his new life as this person. And so we have Lost Highway. So guys, today's review was requested by one of my subscribers, 1970 DJ, and when this movie was suggested I had no idea what it was, but I thought, you know what, someone suggested a film, I'm gonna watch it. Because obviously if I'm asking for people to request me things, I gotta watch the things they request. So, what did I think of Lost Highway? Well, I went into this movie knowing absolutely nothing about it. Didn't know whether it was gonna be a comedy, a romantic flick, a horror, absolutely nothing. But I gotta admit, I really loved how this movie started off. It really created brilliant tension, because with not knowing anything about this one, it really could have gone anywhere. Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette's characters were quite interesting, and they did make me want to find out more about them, like what their relationship was like, how they interacted with other people, what their backstory was. And it really looked like this was going to an interesting place. But I gotta admit, this movie really lost me once Bill Pullman's character switched over to the other person. From that point on, I just had no idea what was going on in this film. Because for the longest time, they don't really revisit the reason why he actually becomes a different person. Because honestly, when I was watching this, I didn't think that it was him becoming another person. I thought it was that he was switching places with another person to put him in prison. I thought that the stranger had switched him out with another person to kind of get him away from this situation. I had no idea that he actually became this other person. I thought they were going to explore like why this guy was chosen to take the other guy's place, but they really didn't. So for the longest time, I'm just wondering what the hell's going on, and it seemed to be like it just turned into a completely different movie. But then when it started to become a bit more surreal, that's when my interest started to peak again, because I thought they were going to explain like why this person was there, why he was chosen. But then I found as it was going on, it gave me more questions than answers, until eventually I got to the end of the movie and I was there just like, what did I just watch? Now, more often than not, I understand what's going on in the movie. Then when you get to these more complex ones, I do tend to get them. And if I don't, I tend to not really worry about getting it. But with this one, I really thought, you know what, I must be missing something. This movie has such great acclaim. It's from a really popular and well-celebrated director, so there must be something I'm missing here. And so I did what I don't normally do for these movies. I looked up an explanation. And the explanation this person gave was completely different to my interpretation of this movie, which I gotta admit, I found quite interesting. Once I looked up the explanation for this movie, it did make me think a bit more of it, because my interpretation of it was that he switched out with a different person, but apparently the interpretation of this movie is that he's the same person, but he's living out a fantasy. Because it wasn't the fact that he gets framed for his wife's murder, it's the fact that he actually did do it, and that he is on death row, and that when the light show happens and he becomes this different person, it's the start of his fantasy. It's his way of coping with the fact that he's on death row. Because at the start of the film, this guy isn't able to satisfy his wife sexually, whereas this other guy gets women all the time, and he's able to satisfy them as well. And this further adds to the fact that he's living in a fantasy, the fact that he couldn't do it in his real life, so in his fantasy, he can, you know, satisfy women. And in the very last shot of the movie, I thought that he was kind of morphing into the other person and kind of battling with his duality. But apparently a different interpretation is the fact that his fantasy is kind of colliding with reality, and he's getting the chair. And so real life is coming into his fantasy, and you see him die, which I thought, again, was a really good interpretation. Now, normally, I complain about movies that rely solely on your own interpretation, because my issue is you've got to tell a satisfying beginning, middle, and end, and then allow people to put their own interpretation on it. And I think this movie does that brilliantly, because even though, to be honest, I didn't really like this story, it did tell a satisfying beginning, middle, and end. It had a clear goal, it told a story, and it allowed you to put your own interpretation on it, because my interpretation of this film was completely different to most other people's ones. And to be honest, even though I didn't really enjoy this movie all that much, I was satisfied with what I got. I really felt like it was trying to tell me something, rather than having me tell it my story. And I haven't really watched many of David Lynch's movies, but I do feel that this is kind of his thing, and it's very easy to see why this guy is such a celebrated director, because he's quite unconventional in his storytelling, and that's brilliant. We need more directors who don't tell such linear stories, who try and shake things up a bit, you know, try and tell a different kind of story. And that, at the end of the day, is Lost Highway's best quality. Overall, guys, I had very mixed feelings on this movie. First of all, the acting was really good. I liked the cinematography, the effects were decent, and I did like that it allowed you to put your own personal spell on it whilst telling its own story. But if I'm being brutally honest, I just really wasn't that into this story. though I could definitely recognize the things that it does well, for me, I just really couldn't get into this one, and it did actually take me looking up someone else's interpretation to make me appreciate what I'd just watched. Because honestly, if I'd have just left this to my own interpretation, then I wouldn't have thought very much of this film. But even still, I'm very glad that someone asked me to watch this movie, because I never would have sought this out myself. Because it allowed me to venture outside movies that I don't normally watch and give me a whole different experience, even if I didn't really think it was all that. Nonetheless, I'm very grateful for the recommendation. But do I think you guys should watch this one? I wouldn't say that I didn't like this movie that much that I would say to actively avoid it. It definitely has more pros than cons, but if I'm going on my own personal recommendation, I would say not to watch this one, because my personal experience was that I didn't really enjoy this one. But thinking about this more critically, rather than going on my own opinion, I would still say to watch this one, because I feel it has quite a lot to offer. So basically, my critical side says to watch it, my own opinion says not to watch it, so make of that what you will. Okay guys, that's my review of Lost Highway. Do you love it? Do you hate it? What do you think I should watch next? Whatever it is, drop it in the comments below. Until next time, I've been Michael. See ya!